Today we're going through the Pokemon that Game Freak quietly banned and never explained. Not banned from competitive, not banned from trading, banned from the actual games entirely. These are Pokemon that were obtainable in one game and then silently blocked, removed, or locked behind something that no longer exists in the next one, with zero in-game acknowledgement that anything changed. Some of these were accidents, some of them were clearly deliberate, and some of them are still banned right now, decades later, and Game Freak has never once said why. Starting with Kanto. Now, if you played Red and Blue, you probably know about Mew. Mew is the original mythical Pokemon, number 151 inches the Pokédex, and in the original games, there was exactly one way to get it legitimately, which was a Nintendo event that ran in 1996 and 1997 and then never came back. If you missed those events, you were done. There was no in-game method, there was no second chance. Mew was just gone. Now the famous Mew glitch exists and you can use it to get a Mew in Red and Blue through a specific sequence of steps involving a trainer on Route 25, but that is a glitch. That is not an intended method. The intended method was attending a physical event that Game Freak held once and then closed the door on permanently. Every copy of Red and Blue you have ever played has a Mew in the data. You can see it in the Pokédex. You can read its description. And unless you went to a specific event in Japan or a Nintendo-sponsored distribution in 1996, you were never getting one through legitimate means. Game Freak put Mew in the game, gave it a Pokédex number, made it findable, and then banned it from everyone who did not show up in person. After that we have Celebi, and Celebi is in some ways even worse than Mew because at least Mew had the glitch. Celebi is Pokemon Gold and Silver's mythical, number 251, and in Gold and Silver, there is literally no way to obtain it at all in Western versions of the game. None. It was distributed through a GS Ball event in Japan in 2001 using the Pokemon mobile system GB, which was a Japan-exclusive service that connected Game Boys to mobile phones. That service never came to the West, the GS Ball event never came to the West, Celebi never came to the West in Gold and Silver through any method. Western players could see Celebi in the Pokédex data, they could read about it, and they could never get it. The only Western distribution Celebi ever got for those games was through a Pokemon Coliseum bonus disc in 2004, which was 4 years after Gold and Silver launched. So for 4 years, Celebi sat in the data of every Western copy of Gold and Silver, completely obtainable in Japan through a service Western players did not have access to, and completely banned from everyone else by default. I mean, that is a wild situation to put players in. Now moving on from that, we have Jirachi and Deoxys in the Generation 3 games, and these two are interesting because they represent the point where Game Freak started banning Pokemon, not through missed events, but through hardware that became obsolete. Jirachi in Ruby and Sapphire was distributed through a Pokemon Coliseum bonus disc in North America in 2003 and 2004. That disc is a physical object. Once that disc stopped being shipped and stores stopped carrying it, Jirachi was gone from Ruby and Sapphire forever. You could not download it. You could not get it through a friend. You needed that specific disc. And Deoxys in Fire Red and Leaf Green was locked behind a physical item called the Aurora Ticket, which was distributed at live Nintendo events in 2004 through a feature called Mystery Gift. If you did not attend one of those events with your Game Boy Advance and receive the Aurora Ticket wirelessly, Deoxys was banned from your copy of the game. Not hidden, not locked behind a hard puzzle, just banned unless you physically attended a timed event that has now been closed for over 20 years. Both of those Pokemon are still sitting in the data of every Ruby, Sapphire, Fire Red, and Leaf Green cartridge ever sold. You can find them in the National Pokédex. And for most players who picked up those games, they are completely unreachable by design. After this, we have the National Pokédex situation in Sword and Shield, which is a different kind of ban, but it is a ban. When Sword and Shield launched in 2019, Game Freak announced that only a selection of Pokemon from previous generations would be available in the game. Not all 800 plus Pokemon from the previous games would transfer over. They called it the Galar Pokédex. What this meant in practice was that hundreds of Pokemon you had caught, trained, and used across years of games were banned from Sword and Shield. You could not bring them in. You could not use them. Pokemon like Bulbasaur, Squirtle, the original starters from Kanto, were not available in Sword and Shield at launch. Neither were Mewtwo, the original legendary from Red and Blue. Neither were dozens of fully evolved competitive staples that players had been building teams around for years. Some of them were eventually added through the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra DLC, but others were still missing even after both expansions. Game Freak removed hundreds of Pokemon from the mainline game simultaneously, and the stated reason was that improving the animation quality of the Pokemon that did make it required the additional development time. That explanation did not really satisfy anyone, and the reaction from the community was strong enough that it became its own controversy. But the outcome is the same, regardless of the reason. Hundreds of Pokemon were banned from the main game, and a significant number of them have still never returned to the mainline series in a fully usable capacity. Now, while we're talking about Pokemon that got cut, I want to bring up Volcanion because Volcanion is probably the cleanest example of a Pokemon being banned from its own generation. Volcanion is a fire and water type legendary introduced in Generation 6, meaning Pokemon X and Y. It has a Pokédex entry in X and Y, it has a full set of moves, it has a base stat total of 600. It is a complete, finished Pokemon that exists inside the game you are already playing, and it was completely unobtainable in X and Y through any in-game method. 0. No event at launch. No hidden location. No puzzle. Volcanion was just sitting inside the game files of X and Y, fully coded, fully animated, with a Pokédex description, and Game Freak locked it behind distribution events that did not happen for almost 2 years after the game launched. The first Western event distribution for Volcanion was in October 2016. X and Y launched in October 2013. For 3 full years, Volcanion was in the game you owned and completely banned from you by design. After that, we have Marshadow in Sun and Moon, and Marshadow follows the exact same pattern as Volcanion but with an even longer gap. Marshadow is a ghost and fighting type mythical in Generation 7, fully coded into Sun and Moon from day 1. It has a Pokédex entry. It has unique moves, like Spectral Thief, which is one of the most distinctive signature moves in the entire franchise. It is completely finished. And the first event distribution for Marshadow in any region was tied to a promotional event for the Pokemon movie I Choose You in October 2017, almost a full year after Sun and Moon launched in November 2016. So for an entire year after you bought the game, Marshadow was sitting inside the data you paid for, listed in the Pokédex you could scroll through, and banned until Game Freak decided a movie promotional event was the right time to release it. I mean, the move is literally called Spectral Thief. It is one of the coolest concepts in the game, and it was locked away for a year behind a cinema ticket. Moving on from that, we have a situation that is different from all the others on this list, and is honestly one of the strangest bans in the franchise. In Pokemon Black and White, there is a Pokemon called Zorua and one called Zoroark. Both of them are Generation 5 Pokemon, and both of them were available in Black and White, but the method to obtain them in Black and White required you to have specific event Pokemon from the previous generation transferred into your game. To get Zorua in Black and White, you needed to transfer a specific event Celebi into your copy of the game. The Celebi had to be one distributed at a particular Nintendo event in Japan or internationally in 2011. If you did not have that event Celebi, you could not get Zorua through the intended in-game method. You could still catch Zorua later in the game through other means, but the original intended acquisition path for a brand new Generation 5 Pokemon required you to have attended an event from the previous generation. Game Freak chained 2 separate event bans together, one on Celebi from 2011 and one on Zorua, and if you missed the first one, the second one was gone too. Now the last one we're going to cover is the one I think is the most absurd example of a permanent ban in the entire franchise, and it involves Pokemon that were banned not by Game Freak, but by technical infrastructure that Game Freak no longer operates. The Pokemon Bank was a paid cloud storage service for the 3DS era games, launching in 2013. When the Nintendo 3DS eShop closed in March 2023, new subscriptions to Pokemon Bank ended. Game Freak extended the service for free for a period after the eShop closure, but eventually, that window closed too. What this means is that any Pokemon stored in Pokemon Bank that was not moved to Pokemon Home before the service became inaccessible is now permanently locked. Not in a game, not transferable, gone. There are players who stored their event legendaries in Pokemon Bank, the ones from the distributions we already talked about, the event Celebus and the Aurora Ticket Deoxys and the Colosseum Jirakis, and stored them in Pokemon Bank, thinking it was safe. Those Pokemon are now sitting on servers that are either inactive or inaccessible, and there is no known recovery method. Game Freak has not commented on this. The Pokemon are not deleted in the sense that the data presumably still exists somewhere, but they are functionally banned from ever being used again by anyone. Now, I want to be clear that most of these Pokemon are eventually obtainable through later games. Mew is available in Let's Go, Celebi has had multiple distributions, Jirachi and Deoxys have come back through various events over the years. But the point is not whether you can get them now. The point is that every single one of these Pokemon was present in a game you could buy at a store, listed in the Pokédex you were looking at, and then silently blocked from you with no in-game explanation, no warning, and in some cases no alternative method for years. The games never tell you this is happening. The Pokédex does not say this Pokemon is unobtainable in your region. It just sits there with a description and a blank caught indicator, and the game says nothing, which is a genuinely weird thing to do to someone who just paid for a game.